Welcome to the Marriage Puzzle Podcast with Julie and Thomas Hobby. We are marriage coaches who help couples with pain points about money, intimacy, and communication go from being overwhelmed to being secure in their marriage.
If this is your first time listening to us, thanks for checking out our podcast. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating and a review. Let's dive into this episode.
Hey everyone. When Thomas and I started this podcast last summer, over a year ago, we wanted to pick a niche of what we could talk about. Yes, we were going to talk about lots of things that happen in marriage, just like a puzzle, right? You turn over different puzzle pieces, not sure what to expect or how to navigate, figuring out where that fits into life. But we wanted to hone in on kind of a specialty. And we haven't picked just one yet, but three. And we love talking about money, sex, and communication because just like last week, Thomas explained that we kind of picture it as like a three-legged stool, that marriage stands on those three: money, sex, and communication. And so this week, we're going to be talking about sex. And we don't hold back from that because if you have a lack of sex or lack of enough sex in your marriage, it's going to drive a wedge between you and your spouse. And if you take away that leg of the stool, if you will, it's going to get wobbly.
Yeah, totally. And when you got married, you probably in your wedding vows, somewhere in there, basically made a covenant with your spouse that you would only be with one another physically and mentally and not go be with other people. And the problem is a lot of times that can be like when you first start dating someone. You're showing them your best self to try and make sure they stay interested in you. And then, that kind of fades away once you get married. They're kind of stuck with you at that point, if you will. Although we've said plenty of times on this podcast, they are choosing to be with you every single day still.
Well, you get comfortable.
Comfortable is a great word for it. And so I think that can happen in the sex area of people's marriage too, because you have to continue to make effort in order to value the commitment your spouse made to you. Let me say that again. You have to continue to make effort to value the commitment that your spouse made to you in this area of your marriage. You can't lock them down to you by marrying them and then be like, oh, cool, we're done. We don't have to, have sex anymore. And you can't not provide that intimacy to them at that point.
And that might work if there weren't any temptations in the world. But, True. It's like, okay, you made that covenant, you vow that, you probably have these unsaid agreements, but, everyone knows in a good marriage, you're not going to be looking at pornography. You're not going to be flirting with other people of the opposite sex or anyone other than your spouse. And yet we're just, like I said, comfortable. And it's like, cool, we don't have to have the intimacy that you probably felt, like you were saying, going back to dating, like you were excited and you were passionate and you couldn't wait to get to the marriage bed because of that physical act of expressing your love. And then we just fall away from that, get comfortable. And yet our world is pushing other things on us that every day it's a choice, like you said, a choice to love and value your spouse. And you need to show them that and bring the sexual intimacy back into that relationship so that you're not even thinking about the other things. I just don't think it's fair to be like, don't look at this and don't talk to that person and don't do this, but I'm not going to give that to you. Right. So I'm going to take it away, right. but then you're going to miss out on this for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah, totally. And we want to talk about two kind of specific areas that we think this can be a major impact in marriages. And the first one is the weaponization of sex. And that's a strong word, but you hear a lot of people talking about, we're in a fight, so I'm going to hold out sex from them so that I get my way. And doing that is going to drive a major wedge in between you and your spouse, because just like you just said a minute ago, there are other temptations out there, but your spouse has made this commitment to you. They're choosing you every day. If you completely cut that off, and I'm not pointing the finger at one side or the other here.
male
It's
or
male or
female,
female.
right?
It's if
Both
either
parties
one of
do it.
you does this, then basically that's going to just drive that wedge. And what's going to happen if they can't get it somewhere? It's
Mhm.
going to force them to go look elsewhere.
Mhm.
And so you can't weaponize sex in terms of your marriage or an argument to try and have leverage or get your way or anything like that. It's going to drive them away. It's going to cause resentment towards you. It's going to really work counterintuitively to the way you think it's actually going to work,
Right.
to get your way. You may win that fight or something like that, but you're going to lose a lot more in that regard.
Right. Is it even worth it?
Right.
But it's just such a cliche to throw that around. Like it's basically giving that person power that they don't need or even have in the relationship, because it's two people entering into this agreement together, this covenant together.
And don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying that an argument shouldn't be resolved before you get to the makeup part of it. But I'm not. What I am saying is you can't withhold it just to win. We've talked about fighting fair in some other podcasts. So if you haven't heard that, go listen to those, because fighting fair is key, and it's not necessarily about fighting to win your side of the argument. That's not what we should really be going for. We should be fighting for a resolution in our marriage. And so I do think that if you're fighting or in an argument or something, the sex is gonna happen. The makeup sex is gonna come at some point, but you probably need to communicate and focus on resolving the issue first from a collective standpoint, not just a I need to win this fight standpoint in order to get there.
So a lot of couples don't have sex or lack of enough sex, because that number is going to be different per couple.
Mm-hmm.
We've been outspoken on a previous episode that we've talked about sex, where our goal of frequency, because I think people want to know that, right? If they do want to talk about sex, then they're going to be like, well, how often is enough? And that's going to be different for everybody's relationship. But I would say every couple that we've coached or have talked about this in this subject with, everyone needs or wants or desires more sex in their relationship. And so the other part of this, as we were talking about not weaponizing sex to win an argument, is just talking about sex drives, because it's not like if both spouses wanted more sex or desired more sex, then we wouldn't have problems here.
Right.
It's usually one has a higher sex drive and one has a lower sex drive. And let me actually say from experience that that can change. It's not like the male's always going to have the higher sex drive and the wife's going to have the lower sex drive. We've seen opposite, or like I said, in my experience, it can change seasonally, hormonal changes. And so one is not wrong or better or worse than the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how we are made. But this is causing problems in marriage, because then that means you're automatically not on the same page with your sex drive, but we're telling you to have sex in your marriage. And most likely one of you is like dying for more of that, and to coming to us, helping, wanting us to fix their sexless marriage.
Yeah. And, I would say even age can be a factor, whether you're both the same age or not. Like, we're virtually the same age.
He's 10 months older. So right now he's like the year older than me, but you've got 2 months that we're the same age.
Yeah. So we're virtually the same age.
Point proven.
And, I think just that's where more of a seasonally this can change. But if you have a larger age gap between you and your spouse in your marriage, you have to take that into consideration too. Not necessarily as an excuse, that you should use that as an excuse, like, oh, I'm so much older than you, I have a lower sex drive, but you need to know that about each other and meet each other where you're at. And I think that basically the spouse that has the lower sex drive probably needs to have a conversation with the other side, and say, look, hey, I know you have a higher sex drive than I do, but tend to have a lower sex drive, and I just need you to one of two things. I think this goes one of two ways. Either you really just don't want it as frequently. I don't know why, but that's not. I don't come from the lower sex drive side, so. But you just don't want it as frequently, and you need to talk to your spouse about that, because if they want it 7 days a week and you want it 2 days a week, you guys have to find a middle ground that's comfortable for both of you. One can't be lacking, and one can't be, putting more out there than it that's going to just drain them. And so you have to have a conversation about frequency and what is acceptable. And then the other side of this is that the lower sex drive spouse might just not think about it as much, right? I mean, you can probably speak to this one.
You just put our cards out there on where we are, at least in this season, because I am postpartum. And so I'm going to use hormones as my excuse. But I just said it's not wrong to be the lower sex drive person, but that is the season we're in right now. And so we are talking a lot about sex, even outside of the bedroom. I would even say
and outside the podcast.
yeah. In our marriage, this is a hot topic because we are always wanting to get better at this. And we have a high frequency goal because we've seen the benefits of, being intimate more often, more frequently together than we just kind of click in other areas of our marriage. But so in a season like right now, what Thomas was just referring to is I've said even this week, I'm just not thinking about sex. And that can be hurtful toward him. So I have to kind of say it I am just not, my drive isn't back yet after having a baby. So I'm not dreaming about being intimate, but I'm so I'm not interested in sex maybe, but I'm interested in you. Mm-hmm. So I have to figure out how to, articulate that. And that's why we're communicating a lot. So that's hey, I'm interested in you. So right now you pursue me. I'm giving you permission. So, we again keep referring back to other episodes, but there's been times it's I'm pursue your husband or spouse, I guess, pursue them. It could be both of you pursuing each other and taking turns, because there are times that Thomas does not like to be the only pursuing person when it comes to sex. And so I have to keep that in mind.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, and it's not fair to you if I never pursue it. But in this season and the changes that we're going through as a family right now, I've had to be open and honest about that and give him and ask him, invite him in, please pursue me, because I'm interested in you, even if I'm not thinking about sex.
And then you're interested in sex.
Once we're getting there.
It's just not at the top of your list. You have so many other things happening, especially because you said, you're postpartum, we've got a baby in the NICU. You're thinking about him all the time. And how often can you be there with him? You're also pumping and trying to produce milk. And pumping. So you have a handful of
I'm exhausted.
Extra full-time jobs that just got added onto your plate by having a baby. And so when you say you're just not thinking of it as much, I'm having to retrain myself to not get offended by that, but to just say, okay, it's just not at the top of your list. There are some other things that are just stealing that priority away, right or wrong. I'm not making a judgment on that, but that you have to then communicate to me, it's okay to pursue me. It's on my list.
Right.
It's just not at the top of my list, but I'm open to it. We can jump to number 4 on the list and go do that, but I may have to pursue you in that regard.
So there's so much even in these examples, which we didn't even plan out, of saying all of our real life situation, but then just, opening up about it. Just think of there's so many takeaways there of there are seasons you need to give your spouse grace and not Thomas isn't pounding it over my head, that I'm withholding sex from him. But also I'm having to be open and honest and saying it's not you, it's just all these other things. So giving him permission to pursue me, but then in turn, I can't give him that green light and then go, oh, I'm tired. Or, so we're scheduling it more often now. if you have to give yourself permission to do that, so then I know when and where and can start looking forward to it. And then that way I'm not like have plans to go to bed and he's pursuing me and I'm like, no, not right now. Like,
Right.
then that's just going to have frustration in each other. And then I'm not going to bed because we're going to be fighting. And then you're not having sex because we're fighting. So that's just a lose-lose.
So then we just rewind this podcast and listen again.
Not withhold sex, but yeah, where is it going with that? I'm just saying, I heard like giving each other grace in different seasons, but communicating it so that it's not just, I don't get a free pass, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That you're giving me grace, but I too have to meet you to meet your needs and say, okay, how can we navigate this season or just this ongoing lower sex drive if that's you?
Yeah, and I was going to just add that, hear us correctly in saying that this could be on the male or female side.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our marriage right now in this season, it's more this direction, but it could be different a year from now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it could be either way. So just kind of insert your own situation into this and give grace to the spouse that needs to have the grace. Don't hear that this is a male-female thing and it always goes in this order or anything like that. Put your own situation into it.
But I wouldn't say like you have to compromise everything in your marriage, but that is what it takes to have a relationship. Two different people having a relationship together is going to be, compromise. So here earlier we're talking about like how often, should you have sex, but don't swing where we do it once a month and that's good. That's 12 times a year. And I would, even in my season, I'm not thinking about sex.
So
I would
much
say
worse
that
when you say it that way.
that is not good.
No.
That would even say that, I would say that's a sexless marriage.
Yeah.
Even if you're like, no, we do occasionally.
Yeah.
And so that's where I would say compromise comes in, because talk about frequency with your spouse. If they're like, I want it six times a week. And then I'm over here like, well, I can give you 2 times a week. Like, can you get it to 4
or 3?
I don't know
What's
what. Yeah, but
appropriate,
I'm just like, whatever. One person says this frequent number, and this other person says frequent number. It sounds so weird to be saying that and like quantifying it to sex, like physical intimacy. But just last week when we were talking about meal planning or budgeting and eating out, you can just say, hey, we eat out 5 times a week right now. Let's take it down to 3 times.
Right.
I'm saying going the opposite way with your sexual frequency with your spouse. Like, hey, what is our rhythm right now? And that's not going to be a magical number every week and every month.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not scheduling it, but you may not know actually.
And if you're on that like once a month type of thing, like if it's really infrequent for you, do the opposite of what we said in last week's episode about the meal planning. Don't try and scale it back, but try and scale it up to an achievable level.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can go from once a month to once a week and then increase it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Get an achievable level so you're not failing and feeling like, oh, this was too hard, we should just go back to the way it was. Do something that's achievable and build on the momentum. So,
yeah, I just was going to add one thing that I thought of when you were trying to explain that when I say I'm not thinking about sex, but I do enjoy it, I guess, like when we do. And it's
that's good to know.
I was going to say I've just heard a lot of like, if you're infrequent and not enough, and it's some of the reason is they don't enjoy it.
Right.
And I've been there. And so I think like, just again, this isn't in our notes, but just a word of advice, like the more you do it, the more you enjoy it, or you can teach yourself, you can learn to enjoy it even just by like accepting that initiation, and smiling through it or whatever. And so that would be something too, is up your frequency, but don't then just do it out of duty and just because, well, they said to up our frequency, so I got one more in. Like,
right.
Start trying to learn to enjoy it, and then that would just be a natural frequency booster.
Yeah. So we want to always try to leave you with some type of takeaway or something that can, as oftentimes as possible, be actionable that you can do out of an episode. And we have one takeaway this time, one actionable step this time, and it is go have sex with your spouse. Go do it.
What your parents never said to do.
Yeah.
Go have sex.
But if you're listening to this together at the same time, then give each other a thumbs up or something, and let each other know, like, I'm good to go for this, like, right now, like, make this happen. If you are not listening to it together, if you're the only one in your marriage that's listening right now, send this episode to your spouse as kind of like a subtle, like, invite to, when they get to the end of the episode and they hear this is their invite to come and join you. If they choose to not listen to it right away, that's on them. You just kind of prod them and say, hey, I really think you should listen to this, like, by the end of the day and hear what it has to say. And then they'll know that this is like an invite to them to come join you. And so, make it fun like that. You can utilize this episode in that way to kind of, jumpstart this for you. So go have sex with your spouse. That's your takeaway for this episode.
Yeah, if that's too hard and you need some tools or tips, I guess, you can go to marriagepuzzle.com. On our website has nothing. I feel like, where am I going with this? Nothing
There's
raunchy.
no tools or tips like that there. But
oh, maybe redo this part. But I was going to point them to our partnership page because
yes.
The Intimately Us app is a partnership with us that you can find on marriagepuzzle.com with our partnerships. And that will give some good conversation starters for sex or tips and stuff, but still in a appropriate manner.
And our other partner, Romantic Blessings, they
Yeah.
are a in the bedroom type of shop.
Yeah.
So you can get lingerie and toys and all kinds of fun things, but it's a safe place to go look. We were talking at the top of this episode, like, to try to provide this for your spouse so that they're not wandering somewhere else to go look. This is a safe place to go look for that kind of stuff. So check out our website. That's where you can find some of these tools.
Not to give a commercial, but I just love working with these people and partnering with them. So to expand on that, like, they have lingerie on their site, but with no models.
Yep.
So it's a safe place that if we want to spice it up, we can look at that together and be like, what would you like me to have, or vice versa, instead of just like, well, this woman, I'm not going to show him that. So we try to provide tools, even our own date night template. That's not sex, but if you need to go have fun with your spouse or go do something to start the conversation about sex out of the bedroom, hopefully we're providing good free tools for you at marriagepuzzle.com. And you can also schedule a free discovery call with us from our website there, because we do cover sex as one of the topics in our marriage coaching if you are interested in that. And of course, you can follow us on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Marriage Puzzle. We look forward to you joining us next week, where together we'll work on marriage one puzzle piece at a time. See you later.
Have a good week.